Witcher Season 2. Oh Lord, let's go. The Witcher Season 2 stars Henry Cavill, Freya Allan, Anya Chalotra, Myanna Burning, and a whole buttload of others. What's up, guys? I don't know if you guys knew this, but I'm a big fan of the first season of The Witcher. I think Henry Cavill is phenomenal in that role, but the world of The Witcher, oh my God, it's massive. And I'm not a gamer, so I went into this really knowing nothing about the world whatsoever. But I'm a big fan of like fantasy, you know, stuff like Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, and countless others. So this was right up my alley, and it does kind of have its big toe in a lot of that stuff. But I found that the series does require like multiple viewings, because every time I've watched season 1, it's like I gather a little bit more information. So going into this season 2 review, and I've never reviewed season 1, might do that down the line, but going into this review, just know that I've watched the season once so far. I'm sure that there's a lot that I'm gonna leave out that I probably don't remember. And I'm looking forward to going back and watching the season again. But what I will say is it's phenomenal. I do like shows that I know are going to offer more and more, like the layers are going to be peeled back more and more every time I watch it. Because shows like that, they're so well written, and it's almost like rediscovering them, something new every time you watch them. But what I can tell you about season 2 is, of course, it picks up right where season 1 left off. If you remember back at the end of season 1, there's this huge battle of Sodden Hill, and you have the Northern Realms and the aggressors. Yennefer was part of the Northern Realms, and so at the beginning of this one, Geralt, who is, you know, the Witcher, the main Witcher, at least in this story. There are other Witchers, but we'll get into that because they are introduced in this one. But he thinks Yennefer is dead. If you remember, there was like a nice little love thing going on, love fest between Geralt and Yennefer, but he thinks she is dead. And we find out that she's not dead, of course. And so it's interesting that a good portion of this season, he thinks she's dead. They're separated for quite a few episodes. And when they do come together, there's friction between the two because he puts Ciri in danger. Ciri is the surprise that was awarded to Geralt, you know, the Law of Surprise. If you're not familiar with the Law of Surprise, definitely go back in the first season. It's explained quite a bit, but basically, if the debtor can't pay the debt, then they have to give the Law of Surprise if the Witcher requested. In this case, the Law of Surprise was Ciri, who was not even born yet. And so this season really is mostly about Ciri and her journey. Geralt is trying to protect her. Ciri, I would assume she's probably like teenager age or something like that. But she's moody and she wants to know more about the ways of the Witcher. She even kind of wants to become a Witcher. Her blood is ultra important because the other Witchers find out that they could use her blood to make new Witchers. So, are you confused yet? There's a lot going on. I've only like really scratched the surface too. You know, you could dig deep into these worlds, but just to get down to the basic nuts and bolts of what the story is about, it's mostly about Ciri in this season, and there's this great battle at the end. Now, going into this review, just know that I'm going to be talking spoilers, but luckily for you, if you're like me, you'll probably forget all the spoilers that I've given you probably 10 minutes after you've watched the review anyway. That's just the type of show this is. Once you dive into this world, by the time you're at the end of it, you probably won't remember anything I've told you, but I can tell you, the show is awesome. And what makes this show so awesome, I think, is just the whole lore of The Witcher itself. You know, what is a Witcher? These were basically discarded boys, because Witchers are boys. They're only boys. And they're basically mutants because they're given this serum, and I guess it literally separates the men from the boys because most people will die from this serum. So basically, genetically, a Witcher is the best of the best. You know, kind of think back to like 300 when he talks about how the children were discarded if they are handicapped or, you know, they have to be perfect. That's kind of the situation here with Witchers. You pretty much have to be a perfect specimen to be able to handle the potion that you're given, the serum. And Geralt happens to be like one of the best of the best. Like, he is a royal badass. So you can see why Ciri is interested in the Witchers, and she even wants to become a Witcher. But Geralt He's so protective of her, he doesn't want her to become a Witcher. One other thing you need to know about Witchers is they really don't have any compassion. It's like their soul is sucked out of them. You know, they seem to not care about anything. And that trait is there with Geralt for the most part. Anytime he's doing a job for somebody, he doesn't get personally connected to the people. You know, he's just a very cold person. That's just the nature of the Witcher. But you can tell that he does care about Ciri. And so there's still some humanity like buried deep inside. And Ciri kind of strikes that chord with him. What really makes any story great are characters. And this is filled with wonderful characters. Jaskier is this bard. He's called the Bard. He's basically a crooner. That iconic song that's in the first season that became quickly like a meme, you know, toss a coin to your Witcher, O Valley of Plenty. You know, that's Jaskier. He's constantly driving the Witcher crazy because he won't shut up, and the Witcher's the opposite of that. He never like says a word. You know, he just grunts and says, So Jaskier was, you know, it's nice when you put two characters together that are like complete opposites and they kind of drive each other crazy. And if you remember at the end of the last season, Geralt basically told him to F off. But you know that in this season, eventually they're going to come back together, and they come back together in glorious fashion because Geralt has to save Jaskier's life. So you can tell that, you know, he loves him. He cares for him. And jumping back on Yennefer, if you remember, she was probably the most interesting character from season 1. She's kind of like the Ciri of that season because we mostly follow her. Of course, the Witcher's the main character, but I like that they give other characters just as important of a role as the Witcher himself. And I think it seems like they're going to continue that trend with future seasons. But Yennefer was so interesting because she's basically a cripple at the beginning of the season, and then she becomes this beauty. And there's a lesson there because she realizes by the end of the season that that's not really what's important. But in this season, she has lost her powers, and so she wants to gain her power back. And so enter the main villain of this season, Voleth Mir, and she makes a deal with Yennefer to give her Ciri. And so this is where you get a really good character arc, because at the beginning of the season, Yennefer is kind of consumed with just trying to get her magic back. And by the time she meets Ciri, she doesn't care about her. So eventually she develops a relationship with Ciri. And so by the time Geralt finds out what she's done, you know, he's very angry with her. And he's like, I can never forgive you for what you've done. I care about you, but you're dead to me. And so there's this nice conflict between the two characters, you know, Geralt and Yennefer. And so by the end of the season, she ends up getting her powers back because she's selfless. She sacrifices herself for Ciri. Now, aside from, you know, the great drama and characters and all that, there's great action in this show. One of my favorites is the first episode, actually, where you have this, what's called a Bruxa, which is pretty much a vampire. That particular episode feels separate from the rest, even though, of course, it ties in story-wise. It's kind of its own thing as well. Because Geralt, he stays with his friend, Nivellen, and throughout the episode, you feel like the villain of the episode is the Bruxa. But it's nice because by the end of the episode, you realize that Nivellen knows exactly what's happening. He's letting her feed on him. He loves her despite that. He doesn't care. And in Geralt's eyes, he thinks, you know, this vampire is trying to kill him. And maybe that's so, but he's pretty much her life force. And I just really like that episode. It just shows that really, like, you know, in a fantasy world, nothing's off limits. You know, you can really venture into any territory with these types of stories. And then circling back to the end, you know, there's this portal called a monolith. And Ciri, she accidentally opens the portal. These creatures come out, these basilisks come out, that's hard to say, in the final episode. So you have this great showdown between Geralt and the Witchers with these creatures. And this show is bloody as hell. It does not hold back. It's definitely like a rated R type of show, kind of like Game of Thrones. And nothing's off limits. It's awesome. But this season was fantastic. As a rating, oh my God. It's hard for me to give a rating because I know I'm going to have to go back and watch this season again. I'll go with a high purchase worthy at this point. But it's nice that you can have shows like this that have free reign and can dive as deep into the lore as you want, because most of the times if this is like a movie, they only scratch the surface, you know, because the source material, The Witcher, that world is, you know, pretty deep. You know, these games can last freaking days. So there's like an encyclopedia of like characters and locations and worlds and all this stuff. But it's a great show. So definitely check out The Witcher Season 2. And I guarantee you, I scratched the surface with all the stuff I've told you. You know, I basically told you the main plot. But like I said, there's so much going on with the elves and the witches and the witchers and all this stuff. But fantastic show. So, have you seen The Witcher Season 2? Let me know in the comments. Also, be sure to come over to Killer Flicks, where we talk horror all day and every day. And on Fridays, we do Free For All Fridays. Follow me at Drumdums on all my socials. Support me on Patreon. Buy me a coffee. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and Drumdum out.